Imagine waking up one day with the strange realization that almost everything you do, the way you scroll through your phone, the way you talk to others, even the way you think when no one is watching, might not truly belong to you. Imagine sensing that some invisible thread has been pulling at you, guiding your choices long before you believed you made them. A thread so subtle, so disguised in ordinary habits, that you barely notice it, yet so powerful it shapes the person you call yourself. What if I told you that this thread isn't a new invention of technology, nor the work of some shadowy power in society? It is older, deeper, and far more insidious. What if the greatest addiction of our age isn't alcohol, not drugs, not money, not even social media, but something we rarely have the courage to name? You've felt it before. That restless itch when silence stretches too long. That need to fill the empty space, to check, to scroll, to keep the noise alive. The unease of being left alone with your own thoughts. The craving isn't always for substances or pleasures, it's for distraction itself. For the constant stimulation that numbs the quiet terror of confronting who you really are. When everything else is stripped away, we don't talk about it because it hides in plain sight. You tell yourself, I'm just busy, I'm just passing time, I'm just catching up. But beneath that excuse lies something more haunting. A fear of the void, a terror of the stillness where truth lives. And so, like addicts, we reach again and again, not for a bottle or a pill, but for the next moment that will protect us from the silence we fear. But here's the paradox. The very thing we run from is the only place we can find ourselves. The silence, the stillness, the absence of noise. This is where meaning waits. And yet we treat it as poison, drowning it with endless chatter, endless consumption, endless stimulation. Why do we do this? Why are we so afraid to be alone with our own minds? Could it be that we sense something inside us, something fragile, perhaps broken, that we would rather never face? And if so, what kind of life are we living if it is built upon escape from the truth of ourselves? Think about the last time you stood in line, or sat waiting at a bus stop, or lay in bed at night, unable to sleep. Did your hand almost automatically reach for your phone? Did your mind lunge for some distraction, any distraction, rather than linger in the discomfort of its own company? What if that tiny, ordinary act is not harmless but the sign of a deeper addiction, an addiction to avoiding reality itself? The unsettling question is this: if your thoughts, your choices, your inner life are constantly drowned in stimulation, who are you when the noise stops? Do you even know? Or has the addiction erased the possibility of ever knowing? Here lies the great contradiction. We live in an age of endless freedom, endless information, endless opportunities for connection. Yet never before have we been so enslaved by the need to escape ourselves. We crave liberation, but chain ourselves with distraction. We want truth, but numb it with noise. We long for meaning, but bury it under the weight of endless, shallow comforts. And the addiction grows. Unlike other addictions, it is celebrated. You are rewarded for staying busy, praised for being endlessly reachable, congratulated for your productivity, entertained for your constant scrolling. It does not shame you in dark alleys, it blinds you in broad daylight. And because everyone around you is addicted to, you don't even realize you are trapped. So here is the haunting paradox I leave you with. What if the thing you fear most, the silence, the emptiness, the stillness you avoid, the very thing you've been searching for your entire life? What if the addiction you never admitted to is not just wasting your hours, but quietly stealing your soul? The question is not whether we are addicted. The question is, Can we ever break free? And if we could, would we dare to face what we might find? The hidden problem and its psychological, philosophical roots, section 2. If distraction is the addiction no one wants to admit, then the next question demands to be asked: why does it exist at all? Why are we, as human beings, so terrified of silence, so allergic to stillness, so dependent on the very noise that drains our souls? The answer is not simple, but it begins in the shadowed corridors of the human psyche. Carl Jung once wrote that people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. That single sentence might explain more about our age than all the statistics on social media usage or attention spans combined. Because when the noise stops, when the world falls silent, when we are left naked before the mirror of our inner life, what stares back at us is often unbearable. Inside each of us lives what Jung called the shadow, the unacknowledged parts of ourselves we fear to face. Old guilt, hidden desires, suppressed anger, unhealed wounds. To confront the shadow is to risk shattering the carefully constructed mask we wear for the world. And so, without realizing it, we reach for distraction not to kill boredom, but to silence the whisper of truths we dare not face. Nietzsche, too, saw this terror of the self. He warned that most people flee from themselves into distraction. To look inward is to discover that beneath the surface of routine lies a vast and unsettling question. What is the meaning of all this? To sit in silence is to feel the weight of existence, pressing down the possibility that life has no inherent meaning, that our identities are fragile fictions, that time is running out faster than we dare acknowledge. It is easier, infinitely easier, to drown these questions beneath an endless tide of trivialities. But distraction is not merely personal, it is cultural. Arthur Schopenhauer saw human life as an oscillation between pain and boredom. When we suffer, we long for relief. When relief arrives, boredom creeps in, unbearable in its emptiness. And so, in our modern age, we have found a solution. Flood every empty moment with noise, with movement, with stimulation. But Schopenhauer warned that this pursuit leads to enslavement, not freedom. The very act of filling the void ensures we never escape it. And yet, the psychological machinery runs even deeper. The human brain, wired for survival, clings to stimulation because it mimics the urgency of danger. Dopamine, the chemical of reward, floods us with every notification, every scroll, every moment of novelty. The brain learns quickly. Silence offers no hit, no rush, no reward. In stillness, the mind feels deprived, like an addict denied his fix. So we keep reaching, keep tapping, keep filling, until the very idea of existing without constant input feels intolerable. This is why Viktor Frankl, a survivor of Auschwitz, argued that modern man's greatest struggle is not hunger, nor war, nor oppression, but the existential vacuum, the emptiness of a life stripped of meaning. Distraction becomes the bandage we use to cover this vacuum. The more we avoid meaning, the more noise we require to silence the wound. And the more noise we consume, the deeper the wound grows. Think about the irony here. Distraction promises relief from discomfort, yet it breeds greater discomfort in the long run. Just as a drug addict needs higher doses to numb the pain, we need more screens, more noise, more stimulation to avoid the silence. And like any addict, the moment we try to quit, withdrawal sets in. Restlessness, anxiety, unease. We tell ourselves we're just bored, but in truth, we're confronting the very demons we've been running from all along. Society, of course, profits from this addiction. Aldous Huxley warned of a future not of oppressive dictators, but of people enslaved by pleasure, chained by their own appetites. People will come to love their oppression, he wrote, to adore the technologies that undo their capacities to think. That prophecy has already unfolded. Corporations engineer platforms to exploit our psychology. Politicians flood the airwaves to distract us from deeper issues, and we eagerly participate in our own sedation. But here's the bitter truth. Society is not the cause, only the amplifier. The root lies in us. Jean-Paul Sartre once said, "Man is condemned to be free." What he meant is that we cannot escape responsibility for our choices, for our existence. Every moment of silence confronts us with this terrifying freedom, the realization that no one else can live our lives, that meaning is not given but created, that we are responsible for becoming what we are. And to avoid this unbearable freedom, we enslave ourselves to distraction. We would rather be chained than face the burden of freedom. The addiction then is not to noise itself, but to escape, to flee from the unbearable responsibility of existing, to hide from the haunting question that waits in silence. What is the purpose of my life? Who am I, truly, when all else is stripped away? And so we distract ourselves with the trivial scrolls, likes, notifications, chatter, because it is easier to be consumed by what is meaningless than to confront the possibility that our lives lack meaning altogether. But what happens when a person builds their identity, their habits, their entire sense of self upon this avoidance? What happens to a society that rewards distraction and punishes stillness? The roots have been laid bare, yet the fruits, the consequences, are far more devastating than we dare to imagine. The unseen consequences, Section 3. The danger of this addiction is not simply that it wastes time. Wasted time is visible. It nags at us, leaves guilt in its wake. The true danger is far more insidious. Distraction reshapes who you are without your knowledge. It seeps into the cracks of your identity until the person staring back in the mirror is not the one who once dreamed, questioned, or sought truth, but a fragmented echo of countless interruptions. Think about it. Every time you reach for your phone instead of sitting in silence, you train your brain to recoil from stillness. Each moment you numb discomfort with noise, you teach yourself that your inner life is unbearable. The consequence is not just habit, it is transformation. Slowly, you become someone who can no longer tolerate reality without escape. Someone who exists only in fragments, never whole, never present. Cognitive science confirms what philosophy has long warned. Our attention is not infinite, it is a limited resource. Every click, every scroll, every burst of novelty rewires the brain's reward circuits. Over time, deep focused, the ability to think, to reflect, to wrestle with meaning atrophies like an unused muscle. We trade depth for speed, wisdom for novelty, presence for performance. And the most haunting part, we do not notice the erosion because the noise is constant enough to keep us from realizing what we've lost. This is the first unseen consequence, the death of depth. A society addicted to distraction cannot produce wisdom, only information. It cannot raise thinkers, only reactors. And individuals caught in its grip lose the capacity to ask the deeper questions that make life worth living. But the consequences run deeper still. Consider how distraction erodes intimacy. Relationships require attention, presence, the courage to sit with another human being in their unfiltered reality. But how often do we, even in the presence of those we love, reach for the screen to avoid discomfort. How often do conversations trail into silence, only to be patched by the glow of a device? Slowly, subtly, we learn to fear genuine connection. It becomes easier to scroll through endless faces online than to face the vulnerability of truly seeing and being seen. And in that avoidance, loneliness grows not because we are alone, but because we are no longer capable of being together. Psychologists now speak of continuous partial attention, a state in which the mind is never fully here, never fully there, always scattered, always diluted. It is the psychological equivalent of malnutrition, constantly feeding, never nourished. And just as the body starves without true nourishment, the soul withers without true presence. Then comes the societal cost. When masses of individuals are addicted to distraction, truth itself becomes fragile. We scroll headlines instead of seeking understanding. We consume slogans instead of wrestling with nuance. We grow impatient with complexity and demand simplicity, even when reality resists it. In this soil, manipulation flourishes. Leaders, corporations, entire systems thrive not by offering truth, but by offering the next fix of distraction. Bread and circuses upgraded for the digital age. And so the second unseen consequence is the collapse of collective meaning. A distracted society is easy to control, easy to divide, easy to pacify. It does not ask why, it only asks what's next. But perhaps the most devastating consequence is the one least spoken of, the quiet erasure of the self. If you are always running from silence, always drowning in noise, then when do you ever encounter yourself? When do you ask, who am I? What do I truly want? What does my existence mean? Without silence, without stillness, without the confrontation of the shadow. These questions remain unasked. The self that might have answered them never fully comes into being. This is the paradox. We chase distraction to avoid pain. But in doing so, we lose the possibility of joy. Because joy is not found in constant stimulation, is found in meaning, in depth, in presence. And these require silence, stillness, the courage to face discomfort. In avoiding the void, we create a deeper void, a hollow life, full of noise but devoid of substance. Arthur Schopenhauer once remarked that most people spend their lives avoiding suffering, only to discover at the end that they have avoided living. The same could be said of distraction. We think we are protecting ourselves, shielding ourselves from boredom, anxiety, existential dread. But, in truth, we are protecting ourselves from life itself. And here is the haunting irony. The longer we avoid silence, the more terrifying it becomes. Like an addict who fears sobriety, we come to fear the very state that might heal us. Sit in silence for 5 minutes and the mind panics. 10 minutes and it claws for escape. But what if we realized that this panic is not proof of danger, but proof of dependence? That the very discomfort we run from is the doorway into freedom. The unseen consequences are already here. You can see them in the restless eyes of a society that cannot be still. You can feel them in your own chest when you try to put the phone down and sit with yourself. You can witness them in the erosion of depth, intimacy, truth, and selfhood. And yet, beneath these consequences lies a possibility. Because if distraction is the addiction and silence is the cure we fear, then perhaps rebellion is possible. Perhaps freedom begins not in noise, but in the radical act of stillness. The question is no longer, what is the problem? The problem is clear. The question now is, how do we break free? The Rebellion, How to Break Free, Section 4. If distraction is the invisible addiction, then rebellion against it must look equally invisible quiet, almost absurd in its simplicity. Not the grand gestures of protest, not the dramatic renunciations of modern life, but something far more subversive, the radical act of reclaiming your own attention. But let us be clear, this rebellion is not easy. It is not simply about turning off a phone or deleting an app. That is like treating a fever without curing the infection. The roots go deeper into psychology, philosophy, even the very structure of what it means to be human. To break free, one must confront the very things that distraction was designed to shield us from. Silence, emptiness, the shadow within, the terrifying freedom of existence itself. Consider the story of Siddhartha, who became the Buddha. He was a prince, surrounded by endless distraction, luxury, entertainment, indulgence. Yet the moment he stepped outside and witnessed suffering, he realized all his pleasures were chains, not freedom. His rebellion was not against society, but against the addiction to illusion. He sat beneath the Bodhi tree, not moving, not fleeing, facing the terror of his own mind until enlightenment arrived. His rebellion was stillness. In the West, we find a similar story in Socrates. Surrounded by a city intoxicated with politics, war, and spectacle, he insisted on stopping men in the streets, asking questions they did not want to hear. He pierced through distraction by forcing attention back to the self. What is virtue? What is justice? What is the good life? His rebellion was not escape, but deeper engagement, insistence on turning the gaze inward, even if it led to discomfort, even if it led to death. So how do we, in our own time, rebel against distraction? First, by daring to face silence, to sit, even for a few minutes, without filling the air with noise. The first attempt will feel unbearable, like withdrawal. But if you endure, you begin to hear something beyond the noise, your own voice, the whisper of truth that has been drowned for so long. Silence is not emptiness, is a mirror, and only by looking into it do you begin to see who you really are. Second, by cultivating attention as an act of resistance. Attention, in an age of distraction, is the most radical currency. To read deeply instead of skimming, to listen fully instead of half-hearing, to give your presence to one person, one task, one moment. This is rebellion. It is reclaiming sovereignty over the very thing corporations, algorithms, and addictions fight to steal, your mind. Third, by embracing discomfort instead of fleeing it. Every craving for distraction is a signal. Something within you is surfacing that you do not want to face. Instead of numbing it, sit with it. Anxiety, boredom, even dread, they are not enemies. They are guides, pointing toward the parts of yourself you have avoided. Jung would say, in the shadow lies your greatest treasure. To meet the discomfort is to begin integrating the self you have long abandoned. Fourth, by choosing depth over novelty. The world will always seduce you with the next thing, the next notification, the next stimulus. But depth, whether in a book, a craft, a relationship, or a conversation, offers something distraction never can. Meaning. Viktor Frankl reminded us that meaning is not handed down. It must be discovered, created, wrestled into existence. Depth is the doorway to meaning, but it requires sacrifice, the sacrifice of endless shallow pleasures. And fifth, by embracing freedom, terrifying as it is. Sartre declared that we are condemned to be free. To break free from distraction means no longer having an easy excuse. You can no longer say, "I was too busy," or "I was too distracted." You must face your life as it is, your choices as they are, your freedom as it always has been. This is terrifying, but it is also the only path to authenticity. But let me be honest, this rebellion will not make you comfortable. It will not make you popular. A person who chooses silence in a noisy world will appear strange, even threatening. A person who chooses depth over novelty will seem out of step, even irrelevant. A person who faces their own shadow will unsettle those who refuse to face theirs. Rebellion is always costly, and yet, what is the alternative? To remain enslaved to distraction, to trade your life for noise, your freedom for sedation, your soul for fragments of shallow pleasures. The cost of rebellion may be great, but the cost of addiction is greater. History has always belonged to those who rebelled against the invisible chains of their age. Today, the chains are not iron but pixels, not bars but constant noise. To break them is to join a lineage of seekers who dared to confront reality as it is, not as distraction disguises it. And perhaps the most beautiful part of this rebellion is that it requires no permission, no revolution, no grand movement. It begins quietly, invisibly, in the sacred act of reclaiming your attention. It begins the moment you choose silence instead of noise, depth instead of novelty, presence instead of escape. Rebellion begins the moment you whisper to yourself, "I will not run anymore. I will face the silence. I will face myself." But what happens when you do? What lies on the other side of silence? Beyond distraction, beyond the shadow, beyond fear. That is where the ultimate truth waits. A truth so deep that once you see it, you can never go back. The ultimate truth, the final, most powerful realization, Section 5. Imagine it. You have endured the silence. You have resisted the itch to escape. You have sat in the stillness long enough to feel the discomfort twist, gnaw, and finally settle into quiet acceptance. What do you discover there, in that unlit room of the self, when distraction no longer numbs you? At first, it feels like nothing, emptiness, a void. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, something begins to emerge. A presence, a clarity, a sense that beneath all the noise you have shed, there is something in you that does not need escape, does not crave distraction, does not fear silence. Something that has been there all along, waiting for you to remember. Here lies the ultimate truth. You are not your distractions. You are not the endless stream of thoughts, notifications, desires, and fears. Beneath them, behind them, before them, there is a self-silent whole, unbroken. The addiction to distraction has always whispered the same lie, that without noise you are nothing. But in truth, without noise, you discover that you are everything you were meant to be. This realization is both liberating and terrifying, because it means that meaning is not hidden in the world outside, in the next scroll, the next purchase, the next achievement. Meaning begins within. Silence is not a void to be filled, but a doorway to be crossed. And when you cross it, you discover that the stillness you once feared is the very ground of your existence. Nietzsche once said, "Become who you are." At first glance, it sounds like a paradox. How can you become what you already are? But that is exactly the point. The self is not something you invent through distraction, is something you uncover through silence. To become who you are is not to add more noise, but to strip it away, to peel back the layers until the essence stands revealed. Think of it like a sculptor facing a block of marble. The figure already exists within it, does not need to be created, only freed. Every chip of the hammer removes what does not belong until the truth of the figure emerges. In the same way, every moment of silence, every act of resistance against distraction, chips away at the false layers until the self is revealed. And here is the deeper paradox, the very thing you have been running from. Stillness, emptiness is the only path to fullness. By trying to fill the void with distraction, you make the void endless. But by entering the void, you discover it is not emptiness at all, but the womb of meaning, the birthplace of authenticity. This is the truth addicts of distraction never want to face. The silence they fear holds the freedom they long for. The discomfort they avoid holds the healing they need. The stillness they resist holds the meaning they seek. The philosopher Blaise Pascal once wrote, "All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone." Centuries later, his words ring louder than ever. We thought distraction was progress, stimulation was freedom, noise was life. But the truth is the opposite. Only in stillness do we remember what it means to live. And yet, this truth is not merely philosophical, it is deeply practical. Think of the moments in your life that felt most alive. The deep conversation where time dissolved. The quiet awe of watching a sunrise. The immersion in creating something that mattered. Were those moments born of distraction? Or were they born of presence, of giving yourself fully to one thing, one person, one moment? Presence is the antidote to distraction. And presence is only possible when you stop fleeing from silence. So, what does it mean to live this truth? It means refusing to measure your life by how much noise you can consume, and instead by how deeply you can experience. It means embracing boredom not as an enemy but as a threshold. It means sitting in silence long enough to meet the self you have been avoiding, and finding that the self is not a monster but a companion, a guide, perhaps even a source of love you did not know existed. The ultimate realization is this: distraction is not the addiction itself, it is only the symptom. The true addiction is escape, and the cure is courage. The courage to stop running, to stand still, to enter the silence and stay there until the truth emerges. When you finally do, you realize that the life you were searching for in 1,000 fragments was always waiting in the wholeness of presence. That joy is not hidden in noise but in meaning. That freedom is not found in running but in resting. That love is not in the endless crowd but in the deep encounter with another, with the world, with yourself, and in that realization, something shifts forever. The addiction loses its grip. The noise no longer deceives. The silence, once terrifying, becomes a friend. You see distraction for what it is, not freedom, but chains. And you see silence for what it is, not chains, but freedom. So I leave you with this question, one final time. Will you continue to run, to flee, to drown yourself in the noise of a life half-lived? Or will you dare to rebel, dare to sit in the silence, dare to face yourself, dare to discover the truth you have been avoiding all along? Because in the end, the addiction no one wants to admit is not truly distraction. It is the refusal to live. And the cure is not out there in the world, it is here, in you, waiting in the silence. Step into it.